I'm Mel Stockwell with Nutanix, and this video demonstrates the Nutanix Prism REST API. So Nutanix is hyperconverged infrastructure. It's basically an enterprise cloud stack, if you will, for your data center. And what I mean by that is it's the entire infrastructure integrated, from the hardware to the storage to the virtual machines that run on top that support your applications and services, as well as some enterprise features, including file servers, data protection, backup and recovery to the cloud, to other clusters, analysis tools, health tools to help manage the environment. But what I'm going to show you regarding the APIs, REST APIs, is take a look at alerts and events. And if we're looking at events right now, we can see that on this cluster demo 2 Acropolis hypervisor right there, we've got over 18,000 events. Now, if you want to try to find out just the events for a particular day or filter by user, you basically can't do that. You have to, as far as I know, you can't do that. You have to scroll through potentially thousands of records to find just the events that took place on a certain day, and then there's no way to filter by user. I will say there is contextual events reporting, and what I mean by that is if I pick on a certain entity in the infrastructure, such as, let's say, data protection, and I want to see everything that has occurred to a protection domain, and that's a collection of virtual machines and files, as well as a backup schedule, locations as to where the remote backups are, and a couple other parameters that you pick up that you apply to protection domain. But again, I can see the events just for that protection domain, but no filtering ability on these fields. So what I thought we'd do is we'd basically build an event log viewer with some functionality that allows you to kind of sort and filter through the data. So we're going to use this cluster. We're going to access this cluster for the REST APIs. Copy that. And here's an application I built based on Python and a web service framework called Flask, and put this application together and deployed it onto a web server. And let's go ahead and give it a try. So we're going to enter in the IP address for that demo 2 cluster, and we have to provide credentials to access this securely. And you can see we're connected. The first thing it does is it sends a REST API call to try and connect to the cluster, and just brings me back some cluster information to make sure that we're connected to the cluster we want. And we are. So let's go ahead and pick a particular date. Let's say we want to see what happened on the 15th of this cluster. So it goes out and calls the REST API for events, and it brings back some information on those events. And the information I'm concerned with just for this demonstration is what account ID, and that would be a user or a system account, did what type of activity on the demo 2 cluster and what time that took place. So you can see demo 2 has 254 events for July 15th. And I can roll through this whole entire list to look at the events. And you can see there's snapshotting that took place, people logged on, protection domains have been added, entities have been added to those protection domains. You can see snapshots taking place, etc. So it records approximately 29 or 30 different events that have taken place. But let's say we want to filter through this list and just find out for a particular user what they did on that day. I can pick the user, I can filter through the list, and it will return back just the events for that user. And you can see that when the user logged in, a container was added to a storage pool, and then the user logged in and out a couple more times during the day. Pick another user. Let's say we want to see what this user did on that day. Filter through the list again, and we can see 2 events, logged in and logged out. And I can even just go back and show me all of the events, all of the activity on the demo 2 cluster for that day, and you're back to the 254 events. Now I can select a different day. Let's actually say what happened on July 23rd, and we can see we had 10 events, not too many, it's a Saturday, but you can see again that users are logging in and logging out of the system. And if we want, we can even search on a different cluster. So we're looking at the demo 2 cluster. I'm going to show you, we do have others in our demo zone. We'll take a look at the metro availability cluster. And this is a vSphere cluster that is stretched across two Nutanix clusters to create real-time data replication for disaster recovery purposes. So we're going to go into the Metro B cluster and take a look. And we can see we had 152 events for that day. Some folks added storage pools and containers. We can see we created an NF data store. A remote site had been added to the system that day. So quite a bit of activity, especially around containers and remote sites, things that you would do for replication. You can see we had replications scheduled at certain times. So it's a nice little reporting tool. Now, how did we build this? Well, again, I said it was made out of Python and a Python framework, web framework called Flask. And I'm just going to show you a couple pieces of the application itself. In general, the most important part of this application, really the secret sauce, and it's so simple it's embarrassing, is the call to the REST API. So we use some logic here to create the REST API URL, and that logic basically is the URL location for the cluster you want, the date that you want to sort for, and a couple other fields to make it work. Once we set that URL, we actually just call the REST API with this command. We provided the URL, and for now I've turned off. False means don't use SSL certificates, and I just turned that off for now since this isn't in a real production system. Once we get the data back, and it comes back as a JSON payload, I go through and I iterate the data, and I do some formatting of that table. So I set up the date, I pick out the user ID as well as the event, and there's a couple fields to kind of unpack that information from JSON so that it can be printed out into displayed in a pretty URL table. So it's really that simple. Provided a couple of views through templating. So I set up a couple HTML pages, and these are just used to either present access to get to the REST APIs or to bring the data back. It's the entire user interface that you saw. So really, that's it in a nutshell. Didn't take a lot of time, a couple hours every few days over a few weeks, and most of that was just learning Python and the web framework. But the access to the Nutanix REST APIs was the easy part. So I hope you enjoyed this demo, and hope it gives you a little inspiration to try out some of the REST APIs in Nutanix to see how it can help with your system.